Hey everybody, welcome to Crackpot, the podcast where each and every week we dive into a different conspiracy theory and we discuss the merits or the demerits of each. We're your hosts, I'm Tim.
And I'm Zach.
Hello, Zach.
Hello, my friend, my podcast co-host.
What is up?
Dude.
Welcome to the dog days of summer.
Welcome to the dog pound.
Welcome to the doghouse.
Yes.
I don't know.
Watch where you're stepping, folks.
Wait, what?
I don't know why I said that. I couldn't think of anything else. Okay, well, I guess we're here. So,
all right.
Dude, this one, I'm not going to give too much of a preamble, not going to wax too much nostalgia here about what you've been up to these days, because this is a longer show, I believe.
Got to get into it.
Yeah, and it's like, let's just jump in. Dude, there is so much going on in this show, this topic. I know you don't know anything about it. I know it's all good in that regard.
Yeah.
But this brings up a point that I would like to make. We've made it before. I'll make it again 100 times. Our listeners do genuinely provide some of the absolute best show topics.
Yeah. Yep.
And I got to give a shout out to Spider.
Oh, this is a Spider show.
Dude, we got to change the name of our show from Crackpot to Spider Recommendations.
Spider Recommendations.
Just that. But we got to get them to do it like in a British, voice memo or something where we can just drop it in there.
Perfect.
So I was going to do that, but I won't do it right now. Because Spider, we need the real thing, man. He recommended this like in a email or something where it was just like, oh, here's like 10 topics. And I finally got around to this one and I was like, oh,
this is legit.
Oh, no way. And then I've been doing the thing that, gosh, this happens so rarely. You know how like maybe 10% of the topics that come along, like as you get into them, you'll actually talk about it outside of the taping session. Where it's like, I was like my wife about it. I'm like, this is actually. Everyone's like, what's
every now and then. Yeah.
So all that to say, super exciting topic. Shout out to Spider, main man Spider. Shout out to our listeners who keep providing us awesome topics to cover. This is like no exception. And Tim, you know what? I feel like I say this every week. 100% the truth. This might be the weirdest thing I've looked into.
For real?
Yeah, it might actually be.
Okay, that's a tall order. But,
it's just weird.
Okay.
And what is hard about it though is like it's one of those where there's like 50 million potential answers or like
perfect.
Things going. I don't think any of them are alien related or ghost related.
Oh, all right.
So
and this is still the weirdest.
Yeah, that's I think maybe what makes it even the most weird. So. Let's jump into it, folks. Today we are talking about the Isdal Woman.
Isdal.
Yeah, Isdal, Isdal Woman. And it's named this because of the location where a body was found. So, Tim, as you know, on some of these types of episodes, I'm going to take you on a journey across land, across sea, across time. Folks, we're going across land and sea. We're also crossing time. For today's episode, go a little east, go a little north, to Bergen, Norway.
Oh, Bergen. That's on the west coast, isn't it?
Yeah, more or less. Mm-hmm. So after you go east and north, then go a little west.
And you go to the west part of Norway. I've read a few books that take place in Bergen, so I'm pretty much considered an expert on this topic.
That's right. Well, you know what, Tim? Go back to November 29th, 1970. Bergen, Norway, city known as the Heart of the Fjords. A city known for its natural beauty, historic waterfronts, delicious seafood.
Oh, I bet.
But it's also known for something a little darker. And that darkness came to light.
What is that?
On November 29th, 1970. I don't know why I said
that was good.
Way,
that was good.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Well done.
Dramatic effect, okay? All right. November 29th, 1970. Typical unassuming day. Father and his two daughters set out for a hike in the Isdal Valley, not far from the city of Bergen. Side note, I've seen various translations. I'm not sure if this is true or not. We do have listeners in Norway. They will tell us. I've seen it basically translated as like Hell's Valley.
Oh, well, see, now look, guys, how many times can we say this? Don't go to the Hell's Valley or the Devil's Lake or the
Headless Valley. Right? Devil's Den. Don't go those places.
Don't go. How many times can we tell you? Literally.
Stay
anyway,
away.
Unfortunately, this was a few years before the first season, so we'll give him a pass on this. But anyway.
Precisely. Well, I tell you what, so they go out in the afternoon on a walk, and they decide to venture off the beaten path. And what always happens when people decide to go off the beaten path, Tim?
I think you find bodies, pretty much.
You find bodies. That's what happens.
Or Bigfoot.
Yeah, so I'd say 50-50 whether or not it's worth it. Basically, this trio, right, father and two young daughters, get off the beaten path. They're walking around. And what happens? They stumble across a dead body.
That's a mood kill.
Yeah, that probably was an immediate buzzkill for all involved there. But the scene was weird. So there was a body laying flat on its back with its arms tucked into a boxer-like position, suggesting that she had not fallen naturally.
Okay.
So they see this body. They're probably freaked out.
Yeah.
They're like, well, you got to go get some help.
And remind me again, this is November?
November 29th, 1970.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's cold. It's probably pretty close to winter at that
probably
point in time.
Snow on the ground, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they just see this dead body, like, whoa, we got to get some help. Let's get out of here.
Yep.
And so they do. They go back, they alert authorities, and reported they found this body. So the police go out to the scene of the crime, or the dead body, or whatever you will, and it's just a very odd situation altogether. So there was a police lawyer by the name of Carl Halver Oss, and he said, the first thing we noticed was the stench. Mm-hmm. He said, I remember we were walking and sometimes climbing up the scree slope. As we hurried along, I'm wondering, where are we headed for? Because it all seems so steep and impassable. There's no hiking trail, that's for sure. And when they got there, of course, they're seeing this body there. And they also notice there's a small fire, like a little fire pit that was constructed nearby.
Oh.
That she had kind of like apparently been burned in at some level, but didn't appear to be the actual cause of her death.
Oh.
So kind of puzzling and kind of weird.
Okay, and there's a stench on top of all that.
Yeah, so they show up, they see this body that's in this odd position, facing up, arms up like a boxer, partially burned, it smells bad, and it's just like very, very strange. And they're just starting to toss around theories like, wait, did she die? Like, did she roll into the fire?
Yeah.
It's actually just a mystery from the very beginning, like what happened to this woman.
Yeah.
So they continue investigating the scene of the crime or the scene of the death, and they begin to find things, and this is where things really start to make somehow less sense. I will just say finding a dead body in the woods off a beaten path will forever be the most normal part of this whole story. That is the normal part.
That's not funny, but it's like, okay, all right.
Put on your seatbelts.
Buckle up. Here we go.
Here's what police found at the scene. They found the charred remains of a woman's belongings, bits of clothing, an umbrella, 2 melted plastic bottles, a packed lunch, an umbrella, half bottle of liquor, a plastic cover for a passport, and a notepad. We'll get back to the notepad later. Mm-hmm. But there were no obvious forms of identification. And furthermore, there were no markings on any of her belongings. So the manufacturing labels for her clothes had been cut off.
Oh.
The labels from the bottles had been removed.
Oh, wow.
Essentially, any personal item that could reveal her identity had been destroyed or removed.
Sure. So they couldn't figure out, like, oh, this shirt was bought from Target, and the nearest Target is over there, and then they can figure out, oh, yeah, that was sold last winter or something.
Right.
But nothing.
Nothing.
It seems rather intentionally.
Yeah, it doesn't, I mean, like, when you look at this scene just as is, it doesn't look like what you'd call a typical suicide. There's a bunch of items. She's partially burnt. She's dead. Any form of identification has been removed. It's just like really weird, and you're probably thinking foul play, at least initially.
Yeah.
A few other things too. The forensic investigator. By the way, his last name is Bones.
That rules.
Well done. Bones. Yeah, that man was born for the job. Okay. Anyways, he noticed a few things that were also just bizarre in addition to what I've laid out. He said she had a watch and jewelry, but she wasn't wearing any of the items. They were placed beside her.
Oh, okay. All right.
He said the placement and location of the objects was strange. It looked like there had been some kind of ceremony.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, initially I'm thinking that it seems like foul play, but it's not like a highway robbery or something, because it would have taken that stuff with them.
Yeah, right. You would assume the gold watch or whatever would have been taken, not to mention maybe anything else of value and not left behind. And also, if you're trying to cover up a murder, you don't leave stuff around.
Also true. Okay. All
so
right.
Just weird. What they were able to determine at the scene of the crime was that this was a woman. So the dead body was a woman. She was about 5'4", likely aged between 25 and 40. She had long brownish black hair, small round face, brown eyes, small ears. At the time of her death, she wore her hair in a ponytail tied with a blue and white print ribbon.
Okay.
Now, at the scene of the crime, they also found a notebook, and there wasn't anything really discernible obvious in terms of like things they could read, because everything was written in some form of code.
No. Whoa.
Numbers, symbols, like letters.
Oh, I have a clue. All right. I have an idea. I have an idea what this might be.
Hold on to that, because
Okay.
you may not be far off with whatever that
Okay.
is.
But that is so fascinating.
And that's all they've got. They got no
that's
ID.
The whole thing.
Yeah, they found this woman with this weird stuff around her, and they don't have much else to go off of, so they begin the investigation.
And I'm going to ask the obvious questions. Dental records, fingerprints, nothing.
It's 1970, so pre-super good probably CSI type stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, like now begins the actual police investigation.
Okay.
But that's all they have to go off of to begin with. So a few days after they found her body, then police made another discovery. They found 2 suitcases left at the Bergen railway station's luggage department. Now, this is good. Inside one, they found prescription-free glasses. So basically glasses with fake lenses in them. And a fingerprint on the lens that matched the Isdal Woman. So they could say, okay, it's this woman's.
Aha.
Alongside the glasses, police found a variety of other items, including clothing, wigs, a comb,
Oh, yeah.
hairbrush, cosmetics, eczema cream, teaspoons, and currency from Germany, Norway, Belgium, England, and Sweden.
Can I just say it?
Mm-hmm. Say it.
She's a spy.
Okay. Put a pin in that.
She's a spy. Look, she has fake glasses. She has currency from all over. Like, come on. I mean, it's clearly some sort of spy game gone wrong, whether it's Soviet or German or who knows what. Yep.
Okay. We'll mark that as your conclusion. So they found that stuff, but guess what? According to Officer Bones, all the labels that could have identified the woman, her clothes, her belongings had been removed.
Yeah.
The woman's name was scratched off the eczema cream tube, with no major department store that they could find a match for, along with her clothing. They found what appeared to be the coded note in her belongings, and it took some time for them to figure out what that even said, and they couldn't decode the whole thing. The only useful piece of evidence that they found that they could go off of in the initial days of the investigation was a plastic bag from a footwear store from a town in Norway.
Okay.
And that was it. They just found this bag, like she had bought something from there recently, and that was it. But there was not even like a receipt in there. So what do? They get a hold of the store owner. They call the store and they talk to the owner's son. His name was Rolf Rotvet, something like that. And he recalled that he had sold a pair of boots to a very well-dressed, nice-looking woman with dark hair.
Mm-hmm.
And she had taken a long time to choose the boots.
Mm-hmm.
Those boots matched the boots at the scene of the crime.
Perfect. Well, what does he remember about her? Did she have an accent? Was she going somewhere? Like, what was her story?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically it. Look, she was a well-dressed, put-together woman that was taking her time choosing some boots. That's really all that he remembers.
Interesting.
So, okay, police now have some more evidence. They have the body, which, is going to be undergoing some level of an autopsy. So they start to figure out, like, hey, maybe we can do a composite sketch.
Okay.
Start, getting APBI out there. And they developed a sketch of this woman and decided to circulate it across Norway.
Okay, yeah.
They run it by different hotels. Hotel employees are saying, hey, look, does anybody know who this might be? And a few people came forward. They said, actually, yeah, we recognize her from staying in our hotels. We recognize her as being a woman of relatively small stature, perhaps a little plump. Her age was estimated to be in her late 20s, mid-30s. Brown eyes, wore her brunette hair at medium length, well-dressed, described as both attractive and also somewhat exotic. Some thought maybe her origins lay in the Middle East. Others thought Southeastern Europe.
Oh, fascinating. Huh.
Yeah, so like, okay, people are starting to come forward like, yeah, we think we remember someone who looked like this. But again, it's hotels, it's Norway, people are coming and going.
Yeah.
It's hard to really say. So anyways, the police then begin the autopsy, trying to get some clues here in terms of who this woman was. Here's what the autopsy revealed. For one, she was a woman. She had never been pregnant, never given birth. A bruise on her neck indicated that she may have taken a serious fall or blow, but she had not been ill. They found smoke particles in her lungs, he said, which shows that she was alive when she was burning.
Oh.
Because they can tell by looking at how the lungs absorb, I guess, the smoke particles.
Sure.
Another oddity here was that there was between 50 and 70 sleeping pills in the woman's stomach.
Oh, my Lord.
But they hadn't been fully absorbed when she died.
What? So she was alive when she was in the fire.
Yeah.
But the sleeping pills in her stomach were still fresh. So I'm trying to think of like the timing. Like, when did she actually swallow those?
This is all part of the mystery. Because let's just take it at face value.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just start with the easiest assumption here, which is, let's just say suicide.
Okay.
So she would have somehow had to like ingest all these sleeping pills.
Yeah.
And then maybe like fall down and roll
she'd
onto
probably
the fire.
fall over. Yeah.
Maybe passed out, roll on the fire. Like, that would be a legitimate cause of death that might more or less align with this.
Sure.
If it's foul play, maybe she was forced to eat those and then they kind of killed her.
Yeah.
But it's the cause of death is even a little bit shaky. But ultimately they concluded it was a combination of poisoning from the sleeping pills and the carbon monoxide poisoning
From the fire.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
They said that had there been no fire, at some point the sleeping pills would have been absorbed and she would have basically overdosed.
Yeah.
But again, like, the scene is just puzzling. She hadn't been shot. She hadn't been stabbed with a knife. She died both from fire and sleeping pills, and it's all just very, very strange. Oh, and by the way, they find all this weird stuff around her that's been, like,
It sounds like intentionally placed.
Maybe.
Like the jewelry and the watch and all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say some of it sounds like it was intentionally placed, and some of it had been intentionally tampered with, probably.
Wow.
So...
Okay.
But police on the scene said doesn't look like suicide, but also we can't say it's a murder.
Sure. Yeah, I get that.
Okay, so as more and more information's coming out, they're talking to the hotels, some more people, that maybe had seen this woman, and they're starting to get a better picture of who this woman was. And here's a few things that probably just make this all the more strange. So using the evidence that they gathered up to this point as a base, they started to dig in a bit further. They found that this woman had stayed at multiple Norwegian hotels leading up to her death, but in each case she used a different alias.
Yep.
The police were actually able to confirm her destinations using the handwritten hotel registration slips that she left behind in one of the bags. And I don't know exactly how they were able to do this next part. They were able to like decode some of the messages, line those up with some of those receipts and say, okay, yeah, she had been staying at these different places.
Okay.
They couldn't really get into, again, who she was, but she stayed in Oslo, Trondheim, Stavanger, and Bergen in the months before her death. Each time she used a different name. The only thing that never changed about her was her alleged origin, which was Belgian. Sometimes she stayed under the name Genevieve Lancière. Other times it was Claudia Tielt, Claudia Nielsen, Alexia Zarne Merchez, Vera Jarle, and Elizabeth Leuenhofer. So, just bizarre. Always listed her nationality as Belgian, stayed under all these different names. And ultimately, what they were able to figure out in working with the Belgian authorities was that none of the names were real, all the passports were fake, and there was never this woman really to begin with.
What?
Also, the addresses that she provided, like in terms of where she had been previously or some of those passports, those never existed either.
Oh, really?
So,
like, even that was forged?
Everything was forged.
What is going on?
And it's like, I don't think you could pull that off today.
No.
Any of this.
I doubt it.
But in 1970, I bet you could. Right?
Maybe you can. What about the notebook? What about the codes in the notebook?
That's how they were able to decipher where she had stayed alongside the slips.
So that, yeah.
But like there wasn't a ton else. It was just like, and there was just some speculation that they even decoded it right in the first place to line up with some of those hotels. But because they figured out, okay, this letter must correspond with this certain hotel receipt or slip or whatever.
Okay.
They could kind of reverse engineer it that way. So kind of strange. But now they're starting to get some more leads here. Okay, they know where she stayed. They're able to talk to specific people that worked in these hotels. And they actually found a few hotel workers that said, yeah, we recognized her. And there was one woman named of Alvild Ragnes who said she remembered the woman. She said, my first impression of her was of elegance and self-assuredness. I remember her winking at me. From my perspective, it felt as though she thought I'd been staring a bit too much at her. And she also was known to have a bit of a strange kind of, way of basically handling herself. Some said she had a very particular aura. She had a marked reserve. People noticed she had a strange scent, and she wore a lot of makeup. She had various quirks. For instance, in one of her hotel rooms, she always put a chair in the hallway as soon as she left the room.
What?
And then carried it back inside when she returned. That's weird.
Very weird.
She also allegedly changed the number of one of her hotel rooms herself. So like the little thing outside the door that says 331, she made it say 113 or something. Another time, a woman and an unknown man had allegedly dined together at the hotel dining room without ever exchanging a word. So she was in the dining room sitting across from a man. They ate in silence. And another time, a hotel employee was surprised to see this same woman along with probably the same unknown man who had taken a seat in the chair in her room. And while the maid or whatever was like freshening up the room, the two just sat across from each other, the woman and the unknown man, and didn't say a word the whole time. So this woman's cleaning the room. That guy and this Isdal woman are sitting there in complete silence, like staring at each other.
Wow.
While the person is cleaning the room.
That's super normal. But, okay, so that could make sense if that gentleman was perhaps her handler.
Sure.
And from Moscow, for example. Well, he's not going to say a dang word in public if he's from Moscow, right? He's going to keep his mouth shut.
Let's do the least suspicious thing possible. Let's sit here in complete silence. But you're right. I think you're onto something there, which is, maybe he had an accent.
Maybe he had a very distinct accent or voice or something.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, better to not say anything.
And maybe she thought the same, too. We don't really know.
Okay.
But as they continue digging in, they're able to find out a few more things about this woman. And they found that not only had she traveled through Norway, but she had actually been there earlier that year. They also confirmed, based on some of the hotel slips and the code, that she had traveled to Paris and Switzerland before her death.
Okay.
So this is all confirmed, also based on some currency they found in her luggage in addition to some of those slips. So yeah, you have a woman here. The question is, suicide, murdered, something else? But you know what, to be honest with you, Tim, like I almost feel like those even aren't the right questions. It's more like, who is this woman and why did all of this happen?
Why?
Like what is actually the deal here?
Yeah. I mean, do you want me to speculate openly yet? Or,
yeah, I mean, go ahead, because this is kind of where the case ended in the initial investigation.
Sure.
So the Norwegian police continued digging around, kicking things up. They don't have anything else. This is all they can figure out. So about a year after they opened the investigation, they closed it. They buried the woman in a coffin at an unmarked gravesite.
Yeah.
With the ability to exhume the body later.
Oh, sure.
And they also did take some DNA evidence and preserved it in case something else happened down the road so they could dig into this.
Sure.
So that was all it was at the time, and that's how it was for about 40 years. We do have some more follow-up information here, but I mean, where's your head at?
Well, my head is still squarely that she is a spy, and it could very well be suicide, and her cover could have been blown, or she was in peril or something, and she knew she had to, essentially off herself, and she went into the woods, she went off the beaten trail, and she burned a bunch of documents, she took a bunch of sleeping pills, she fell in the fire, and she died. End of story.
Yeah.
I could, as far as I understand it, that could answer all the questions. On top of that, it could also be murder. I mean, same basic scenario. She's a spy. Someone finds her, drags her into the woods, or meets her in the woods and then kills her, burns her.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah, you could be right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
that's interesting.
Well, thanks, folks, for tuning in this week.
Yeah, let's keep going with this a little bit further, though. So, yeah, I think you're onto something, though, with the spy angle. But it gets more complex the further we get into this, too. Because initial suspicions really were like, okay, yeah, maybe she was involved with the Soviets. The Norwegians at the time were developing a brand new missile capability, which was just about to be released, was being tested in Norway, and was in use until like 2005. So it was this Penguin missile, which was, I guess, designed to target ships in the ocean. And the Russians were interested. Some of the initial investigations suggested that her travel aligned with where they were doing some of the testing of this Penguin missile, and so maybe that's what it was. You also have NATO troops stationed up in Norway. Maybe she was spying on them. But again, was it for the Soviets? Was it for somebody else?
I mean, could literally be anyone.
We actually don't know. So about 46 years after the case was closed. So this gets us into the late 2010s. Journalists and the Norwegian police decided to reopen the case, hoping that forensic technology had evolved. Maybe some DNA analysis could help us. They want to figure out who this woman was. So they decide to get into doing a handwriting analysis, and this was kicked off by the Norwegian intelligence service. And this is so freaking cool, man.
And what year is this?
This was 2016.
Got it.
They were able to determine based on her handwriting alone that she probably went to school in France.
What? How do you... Okay, I mean, I believe them, but how do you come to that conclusion on handwriting?
It's also possible she studied in the French-speaking part of Belgium or Switzerland, and they determined this based on the job title that she used on one of the hotel registration slips, which was, in German, I guess it's like Antiqueshalderin, which also means antique dealer, which was a common phrase at the time for French speakers, I guess, to write. They arrived at this conclusion, get this, by the way that she carried a double cross stroke at the bottom of a lowercase t, which was common at the time in the French-speaking world. So she like signed her name and put like an extra dash across the T.
Oh my God.
Which suggested she had been educated in France or somewhere that spoke French around this time.
That is so weird.
Super weird.
Okay, all right.
But the plot continues to thicken. So, by the way, if she's educated in France, what does this have to do with the Soviets?
I mean, you could send Russia has a long history with France, so potentially she's Soviet and then went to school in Paris.
Could be. I just want to kind of spell that out because it's like, well, all of a sudden they're saying, no, she wasn't educated in Moscow per se. She was educated in France. Also, okay, so she claimed on the hotel slips that she was Belgian, you know, and they did a little bit more digging into this. There were some complexities with like public safety records and those, like what I've learned both at work and also now through the show is Europe loves to protect their data privacy.
Oh, good.
So that has also hindered some of the investigation into who she was. But they found that by studying the purpose of her trip, like on these like receipts, the phrasing that she was using was a broken German.
Oh.
So she wasn't probably educated in Belgium, maybe wasn't from there, because of course they do speak German in some parts of Belgium and that kind of thing. But the way that she'd written things out suggested it wasn't her first language, therefore she probably wasn't Belgian.
Interesting.
So she was probably French, or maybe if she was Belgian, she was educated in a part that spoke French. But she could also be Swiss.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, Swiss could check all those boxes too.
Exactly. Just a random aside as well, in the issuing passport authority, because like you have to write that down in those, she had used a term Brüssel-Kaisertung, which I guess was an expression only used during the time of the Nazi occupation.
What?
Isn't that weird? So you got
So
this.
how old was she? Late 20s, early 30s, and this was 1970? I mean, okay, maybe from a parent or something?
Yeah. It's just all like super weird and confusing. Okay. So that's all they could figure out from that investigation.
Weird.
But of course, the internet had to dig into this.
Thank you.
The hive mind, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
crowdsourcing.
Yes, good.
Well, it gets a little more complex. So after the public is onto this, people start digging into the stuff, the evidence that was made publicly available. And by figuring out the dates that this woman was traveling in Paris and Switzerland, some people, some even journalists, thought that, wait a second, there's some strange coincidences here that might indicate who this woman was. Enter a controversial and probably horrible human being all around, Swiss banker Francois Genaud, who's not the woman, by the way, obviously. But Genaud was an enigmatic figure in the Swiss post-war history. When he was young, he actually personally met Adolf Hitler, and he was loyal to the ideas of National Socialism, even long after the Third Reich had collapsed. And as the owner of a private bank in Geneva, he supported the Palestinian resistance with money and some know-how. Because of his extreme right-wing stances, he was actually under surveillance by the Swiss Federal Office of Police for many, many years. So they actually had a pretty good amount of data on this guy.
Yeah.
When people started to line up the dates of his travel alongside of the dates that the woman was also in Switzerland and Paris, it seemed that the dates overlapped 1 to 1.
Oh.
Now, another piece of odd information here is that Genaud, or however you pronounce his name, this Swiss banker, often traveled under fake identities. He oftentimes tried to kind of hide who he was in public. And he had gone to meet in Paris with a Palestinian terrorist, a man by the name of Wadi Haddad. Also, this was corroborated by Genaud's own biographer, who said, yep, I went to Paris to meet Haddad.
Yeah.
This time. He didn't mention anything about the woman.
Okay.
3 months after this meeting, Haddad shocked the world by coming forward and claiming that he was responsible for the hijacking of 3 Swiss airplanes. Now, this was a real event that took place in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Okay. You have a Swiss banker who was supportive of terroristic causes several months after meeting with a known terrorist who flew to Paris under fake identities,
right?
Met in a cafe. Genaud said it all happened.
Yeah.
And then a few months later, of course, these planes go down. It makes you wonder,
was she involved with this?
Was she involved?
What hypothetically would be her involvement?
Well, this is where now everything falls officially into the realm of speculation.
Okay, good.
Because I will say, I'm a little skeptical of saying, okay, you have a big city, Paris, probably 7 million or something people there.
2 people both go to Paris on the same day. Whoa!
Right?
I mean, yeah, come on. Okay.
However, when you sprinkle in the facts of a known terrorist, you have a banker who's sympathetic to essentially the Nazis and the Third Reich, and then you have a woman who dies around the time of a terrorist hijacking under mysterious circumstances in Norway with no form of identity. I mean, it makes you wonder, was she involved?
Wow.
How does she relate to all of this? The timing is really weird.
Right.
Okay. So, and also, by the way, this is important to point out, Bernard, this Swiss banker, traveled with fake passports.
Yep.
He would have had the know-how, the money to fund this woman doing all these different types of activities.
Absolutely. He'd be able to hook her up with fake passports, currency from all different countries.
There was terminology in the passport issuing thing around, using terminology from Nazi-occupied Belgium.
Oh my God!
So it's super.
That is
super
interesting.
Weird.
That being said, that connection could be completely false.
It could be.
Because we don't know.
Well, okay, so could have been some level of, almost like a terrorist or have those ties. Another possibility here, Tim, aligns with the Norwegians. It might explain why they didn't look much further after a year and buried the body and just kind of didn't really talk too much about it in the intervening years. Well, as it so happened, and of course this gets back to the Middle East once again, Norway had a contract with the Israeli government to supply what's called heavy water. I had never really heard about what this was. It's heavy water, I guess, is a naturally occurring form of water or something. They use it to help cool nuclear fission, whether it's like a nuclear silo for missiles or for just power. And Norway actually had an agreement to deliver 5 tons of this heavy water to Israel. They only ended up bringing 1 ton because they were concerned that the Israelis were using it for non-peaceful means. And so another theory is that this woman either had something to do with Norway not delivering on this heavy water, one way or the other. She could have been working for the Norwegians.
Yeah.
Could have been working for the Palestinians. Maybe the Israelis sent her because they were fed up with not getting their supply of water.
Wow.
So I just want to paint the picture of who all this woman could be working for. Well, or what the possibilities are.
Yeah.
Suicide. Murder.
Right.
Death by fire. Maybe saw a grizzly bear and rolled over and died.
Right.
Could have worked for the Soviets, the Norwegians, maybe the French, Belgians, Swiss, Palestinians, Israelis. I feel like I'm leaving 1 or 2 out probably.
Yeah. Well, we've narrowed it down. I mean, it's clearly not the Swedish.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel vindicated. Shouts to my people in Dalsland, baby. So here's what I'll tell you. We have no idea who this woman was, what she was doing, or what was even going on.
What is going on?
Here's what we do know. And this is what the DNA has been able to tell us. Because we all know dead men don't lie. She was of European descent.
She was. Okay, well, case closed.
Now, every investigator, at least who's willing to go on the record and talk about this thing, has essentially said, yeah, this ain't no suicide.
Okay.
In fact, police investigator Havik said, personally, I'm totally convinced this was a murder. She had various identities. She operated with codes. She wore wigs. She traveled from town to town. She switched hotels for a few days. This is what police call conspiratory behavior.
Yeah. Obviously, we wrote the book on that. I mean, clearly.
So, okay, Timothy Jerome.
Well, okay. I mean, I have a few ideas, but I'm curious. I mean, you've done more research on this than I have. Where's your head at? I mean, what's your gut tell you?
Okay, I really absolutely believe the spy angle.
Okay,
I think that's probably right. And I don't think that's even such a stretch based on the evidence.
She has codes and wigs and passports. Like, it's clearly she's a spy.
Yeah, she's not like really talking with anybody. Basically, she's not. In no way is she actually like trying to reveal who she is. She's trying to remain elusive. So that would suggest a spy, whether it's a government spy or somebody hired her.
Yeah.
Is a completely different matter. So I come down on the side of, I think she was running surveillance, but dude, that's all I know. Like, I couldn't tell you, like, I think the whole Swiss banker angle is...
That's my second question. Do you think there is actually a connection with the Swiss banker?
I kind of think there is.
Okay.
Because it would, like, he would be able to provide the funding, the means, the wherewithal to do some of this stuff, not to mention maybe make some connections for her to do some further digging.
Sure.
And whether it was to help the Palestinian, cause, or whether it was just to be an all-around bad person and maybe do other things that we're not aware of. Like,
right.
I don't know, but I think there's a connection there at some level.
Now, if she was sponsored by the Soviet government or the Belgians or whoever, the Swiss banker wouldn't have to be funding all that sort of stuff.
That's true.
I'm not at 100% that the Swiss banker is connected to her. Mm-hmm. What I'd like to know is this mysterious guy that ate in silence with her. Like, what did he look like? Does he match any sort of description to the banker? Does he look like he's from the Middle East? Does he look like he's European?
Yes, so I do have an answer to that. Because and this is where it was a little unclear on which accounts were coming from who, but one woman said that when she was eating in a restaurant, she appeared to be sitting across from a, get this, German intelligence officer or a German army officer of some sort.
Okay.
So not Soviet,
not Soviet, not
French.
Palestinian, not French. Oh, I don't know. I mean, not going to speculate too much, but definitely a spy. Yeah, but the NATO thing is interesting. The missile thing is interesting. I mean, there's just it's just wild speculation, honestly.
It really is.
What about the guy who found the body?
And the kids.
And the kids.
The real question is, who are those kids?
Yeah, right?
And how are they involved in this? Well, actually, dude, I mean, this sounds crazy, too. You actually opened a door here.
What's that?
I mean, maybe he had something to do with it.
Maybe it's like, well, we got to get her out of the woods.
Yeah, dude. And then brought the kids back to make him look all the less suspicious.
Yeah, I'm just a dad out for a hike with his 2 little kids.
That's a really good point. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it could have been that, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of where does this bring us to? What is the most likely, least likely? I would say most likely, okay, clearly a spy. Maybe she's working for 2 different sides. Who even knows?
Yeah. We can speculate endlessly. We could say her parents were Norwegian. She was raised in Belgium. She was educated in France, but she had Soviet sympathies, and she was a double spy for the Swiss banker, trying to do some stuff and got caught. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that could be it. That's as relevant as anything else because we just don't know.
I mean, that truly could be the answer to all this. We have nothing else to go off.
That is so wild. Who do you think knows? I mean, someone has to know, right? Someone killed her.
This is a really good question.
I think we both agree that it wasn't a suicide.
Yeah.
But also, if it wasn't a suicide, how did they get 50 sleeping pills down her gullet?
Yeah.
You know? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like 3. It's 50.
Right?
Yeah, who would even know?
Some Interpol?
Well, I suppose the Norwegians could conclusively rule it out.
Yes.
If they wanted to dig in or, release some protected documents.
Oh, yeah. Talk more about that. So what are this data privacy issue? What is that hindering?
Well, it was hindering the reverse lookup of some of the addresses initially that was provided by the woman where she had stayed in Belgium, and they weren't able to connect some of those locations then back to potential family members.
Okay.
So it was just like hitting a brick wall.
Weird.
Yeah, super weird. But then you wonder, well, are the Belgians in on this?
I wouldn't put anything past those Belgians.
That's right, folks. Okay, so it sounds to me like you're coming down on the side of spy.
Yes.
But who the heck was she working for? No idea.
Maybe she was playing every single side all at once.
Dude, I like that.
Yeah.
She actually might have been.
She worked for it. Who did she work for? Yes. Everyone. I mean, I'm not, once again, I'm not sold on the Swiss banker guy, but then again, it's really suspicious, and the terrorist that surfaces later.
Maybe she was going to stop the terrorist attacks. And then they
right.
found out, and then they killed her. I don't know, man.
What? Well, that is super weird. That is bizarre.
This is one of those times, and this, like I said, happens maybe 10% of the time, where it's there really just are way more questions than answers.
Is there a documentary on this, or a book or something? Or
there have been books, documentaries, podcast series devoted to this stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So I gave you the highest level detail here, but it is just, it's all the same stuff, man. It's crazy. So we got to know, folks, what do you think? What have you done, in terms of digging into this? Have you done your own sleuthing?
Where were you in November of 1970?
Let's turn this back on the listener. Yeah, tell us where you were. Give us an alibi.
A little suspicious, huh?
Because at this point in time, you're most likely a suspect as far as I'm concerned.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. This one is indeed a head scratcher. Honestly, any ideas, any theories you guys have, something we didn't cover, something we did cover, let us know what you think this might all be about. Yeah.
Could be aliens still.
We didn't rule out aliens. Absolutely. But guys, hey, thank you for making it all the way to the end. Thank you for listening to our show. If you like this and you'd like to support us, please head over to patreon.com/crackpotpodcast and you can sign up and get all these episodes ad-free plus another weekly bonus show and access to all the other 7 years worth of content we have out there currently.
And folks, the Wednesday-Thursday show has been really, really awesome. Mm-hmm. It's been really fun to do. We've got a ton of listener engagement on there. And so I would say we will maybe drop a free...
Yeah, we should drop a free one again.
Episode or two out there, so check it out. But it's been a really fun one to do. So that's only on the Patreon feed, and that comes out every Wednesday or Thursday. Hence the name. So,
But... please also be sure to head over and rate and review and subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell your local Swiss banker about our podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.